Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nitya Gola Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gola Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So how do we normally do this? Do you have the verse on your phone? Is that the way we work it? Yeah? Can I do the word for word and you repeat and all that? The usual kind of part of the time? Yeah? Is that okay? A reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 4, verse 26. Is that correct? Today is 26? The appearance of Sri Narad. Evam pravritasya sadam Bhutanam Shreyasi Dvijaha Sarvatma Kenapi Yada Natusha Dridayam Tataha Evam Pravitasya Sada Bhutanam Shreyasi Dvijaha Sarvatma Kenapi Sada Natusha Dridayam Tataha Evam thus Pravitasya one who is engaged in Sada always Bhutanam of the living beings Shreyasi in the ultimate good Dvija O twice born Sarvatma Kena Api Yada,
Yada,
when,
when,
na,
na,
not,
not,
atusyat,
yat,
become satisfied,
come satisfied.
hridayam,
Hridayam,
mind,
mind,
tataha,
taha,
at that time.
sata.
Translation. O twice-born Brahmins, still his mind was not satisfied, although he engaged himself in working for the total welfare of all people. Please repeat. O twice-born Brahmins,
All twice born Brahmins.
still
Still,
his mind was not satisfied,
his mind was not satisfied.
although he engaged himself
Although he engaged himself
in working
in working
for the total welfare of all people.
for the total welfare of all the people.
Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Sri Vyasadeva was not satisfied with himself. Although he had prepared literatures for Vedic value for the all-round welfare of the general mass of people, it was expected that he would be satisfied by all such activities, but ultimately he was not satisfied. So I'll read a few verses because this purport is very short, but I'll make a little comment before. Om Jnana Timirandasya Kanangana Shalakaya Chakshur Anmalitan Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So why was Vyasadeva not satisfied? He'd written all the Vedic literatures. He'd written all the 4 Vedas, in fact, at this point. Samaveda, Rigveda, Atharvaveda, and so on. He'd written everything. Everything was complete. But still, there was something in his heart that wasn't quite right, that wasn't quite feeling the way it should. And remember, of course, we're all very much aware from reading the Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasadeva is the literary incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself. So this literature came from the Lord. It came from God himself. So still, having written all the Vedas, all the 4 Vedas, written commentaries on so many, he wasn't satisfied. He couldn't quite bring himself to the point of fully understanding why it was that what happened. Of course, the whole chapter is centered around the appearance of Narad. But really, most of the chapter is not so much concerned with Narada Muni. The chapter is actually concerned with Vyasadeva himself, the compiler of the Vedas. Although he had prepared literatures, this is the key here, of Vedic value. Veda means knowledge. So there's so many different kinds of knowledge. There's Gyan, which is knowledge, and there's Vigyan, which is realized knowledge. So there's so many different ways in which you can interpret knowledge. For instance, this is a table. Nobody would dispute that it's a table. There's so many things on the table, my bead bag, the book, the cartels, my phone, everything, so many things on the table. So nobody's going to dispute, yeah, this is a table. There wouldn't be any argument about it, because that's the truth. It is a fact. Nobody can deny it. But previously, this table was not a table, it was a tree. It was a part of a tree. And that was also the truth. It had branches, it had flowers, it had roots, it had leaves, it had maybe fruit. So many things were attached to that tree. And again, that point in time, that truth was an indisputable fact. Nobody could deny it. And in the future, this table will cease to exist. It will turn into dust. And then that dust, if it's observable at the time, nobody will dispute. This is dust. This is waste. So we have 3 different absolute and complete and total truths in relationship to the same object. Because with the passage of time, truth changes. So then what is the absolute truth? That is the reason why we are reading the Bhagavatam, to discover the difference between truth, which is mundane, which is material, and truth, which is absolute. That's the difference between Gyan and Vigyan. To give another mundane example, we could say that everybody knows, we all learn in school, and we're all very proud, you know, as children, when we learn the fact, oh, tomato is a fruit. When we come home, we tell our parents, tomato is a fruit, and everybody's very proud of that little bit of knowledge. But then, having that bit of knowledge, knowing that tomato is a fruit, is anybody going to put a tomato in a fruit salad? Nobody will do such a thing. So you know tomato is a fruit, but you have the knowledge, or you have the realization to understand you don't put tomato in a fruit salad, because it simply doesn't go. It's rasabas. It's a complete and total contradiction. So that's the difference between knowledge and realized knowledge. And that realized knowledge, where does it come from? It comes from so many places. It can come from experience. It can come from speculation. You can speculate, well, this is true, this is not, this is false, this is a fact. But then on a higher platform, what we're interested in is knowledge that comes from Shastra. And the knowledge that comes from the Shastra, it can only be contained in its absolute sense when it's given to us by the spiritual master. That's why we revere in Iskcon, and also outside, we revere Srila Prabhupada so much. Because he has given us the absolute truth, the realized knowledge, the knowledge that is contained in the scriptures. Why did he give all these purports? So many Bhagavad Gitas were there before Prabhupada came. So why did Srila Prabhupada title his Bhagavad Gita as it is? Because he's presenting the Bhagavad Gita simply, to use those three words, as it is, without adulteration, without additions, without subtractions, nothing added. He's speaking on behalf of Krishna. Arjuna is representing Krishna, is representing us in our relationship with Krishna. So as Arjuna is representing us, Arjuna also, he simply doesn't take the words of Krishna at face value. He challenges Krishna. So many times in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna challenges Krishna. When Krishna says in the 4th chapter, I gave this imperishable knowledge of science, first of all, to the sun god, Vivasvana. The sun god also changes. He changes by name. Just like the Manus, they also change. A day of Brahma is a long time. So you don't have the same sun god in the one day of Brahma. You have many, many, many sun gods. They come and go. They also have a limited lifespan, a limited opportunity for existence in this material world. So, they change. So Krishna says, I gave this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivasvana. He gave it to Manu. Manu gave it to Ikshvaku, and so on and so forth. It was passed down through the line of disciplic succession. Till eventually, Krishna says, the science was lost. Just like at the time of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the science, if we can call it that, of the chanting of the holy names of the Lord, it was lost. And it went into degradation, and it was misinterpreted and misunderstood. Even the mission of Mahaprabhu, it was misunderstood over a period of time. And then it dwindled till only a handful of devotees were remaining who were true to the message of Mahaprabhu. So many false other organizations just sprung up here, there, and everywhere, till it became just such a cheap thing. Until Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the father of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he rejuvenated the whole science of Mahaprabhu. He put it back on a pedestal which had been lost previously in the previous ages. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was not only a very high official in the British government at the time, in the mid and late 1800s, he was also a great, great, great acharya in our line. He wrote hundreds of books. hundreds of books, in dozens of languages. He was fluent in Persian, he was fluent in Arabic, he was fluent in English, Bengali, Sanskrit, Hindi. I mean, the list of languages on Mahaprabhu was as long as your arm. The languages that he completely was, not only could read and write, he was deeply versed in all of these languages. So in 1896, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he wrote a book called Lord Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts. His Life and Teachings, in other words. Beautiful book. I have it at home. And it's just about 100 pages, 150 pages. Very, very nicely designed. I have the original as it was written by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, designed by him. Of course, the printing that I have is a copy of the original. I don't actually have the original. And I read it almost every day. It's just one of these wonderful books. And in 1896, when Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote and printed this book, he was a High Court judge in the British government in the state of Orissa. He was the administrator for the whole of Jagannath Puri and the whole state. He was in such a high position, the governor of the state, as well as being a High Court judge. People revered him, people respected him. He slept 2 hours a day. He would have a very punishing schedule, and nobody ever disputed his judgment in the court. His judgment in the court, it never went to a higher court, it was never went to appeal. Whatever he judged, it was accepted as being fair and honest. Incorruptible. So as I said, in 1896, when he wrote this book, he sent it to every single major university on the planet. Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Yale, all the major universities of the world, he mailed out a copy. Imagine, nearly 150 years ago. So it was a big endeavor to do that. But he was in a position to be able to do that as being an administrator on behalf of the British government. So fast forward 100 years later, when Srila Prabhupada was in New York, and his visa was expiring, and he had to leave America to renew his visa. Of course, he couldn't go all the way back to India. It was too far of a journey. The movement wasn't established at that time yet, so there was nobody to buy an airplane ticket for Srila Prabhupada to fly to India, as he did so many times in later years. But in 1967, there was nothing. There was just that little storefront in New York City. So Srila Prabhupada went to Montreal, just across the border into Canada, from New York. And there he waited while the devotees were processing the extension of his visa to remain in America. Prabhupada struggled with so many things. However, a part of the time the devotees spent distributing Prabhupada's books, what few books there were at the time. There was no Bhagavad Gita at that time, only Srimad Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada was still working on the manuscript for the Bhagavad Gita, which was stolen by a thief in New York. And his typewriter was stolen, and the manuscript was stolen. So Prabhupada started from scratch in so many ways. However, one day the devotees were distributing Prabhupada's books, or trying to sell the books to the libraries wherever they would go. Harvard, or Yale, or Princeton, or Oxford, or Cambridge. Always the devotees would go to the universities, try to sell the books to the professors, and have them put in the libraries in the different universities around the world. And once they were there in 1967, trying to sell Srila Prabhupada's books to the professors in the University of Montreal, they came across this book that was sent by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in 1896. There it was on the shelf of the university, while Srila Prabhupada was in Montreal in 1967. Somehow or other, don't ask me how, somehow or other, that book, it fell accidentally into the pocket of the devotee when he saw it. And he brought it back to Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, you see, So then Prabhupada explained to the devotees just who was Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. There was an opportunity for Srila Prabhupada. So exactly the year that Prabhupada was born, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur sent that book all the way around the world. And nearly 100 years later, here was Srila Prabhupada, the personification of the Bhagavatam. Here he was in Montreal, receiving this book from one of his disciples who had taken it back to him. So here, Srila Vyasadeva, he is not satisfied. There's something lacking. And he is the guru of all the gurus. He's the personification of the Veda. So why was he lacking? Because he had written all the Vedas, all the rules and regulations that we should go through, all the rules and regulations by which we should conduct our lives, how to perform samskaras and so on and so forth, as you've covered in previous verses. How to do Garbhadan samskaras and so on, everything. So he covered the whole gamut. The Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, how they should behave, what they should engage in, everything to lead a pious life. So you'd imagine at that stage that was enough. If you're leading a pious life, you're following the Vedic instructions, you're following scripture, then everything will be okay. So why was he dissatisfied? Because he had not written the Srimad Bhagavatam. So he was instructed to do so by Narada. Narada was on a completely different platform. He could see things in Trikalagyan. So then the whole population could take advantage of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But then we must remember also, this Srimad Bhagavatam was locked. Locked how? It was locked away. So only the Brahmins could read it. Only the Brahmins could study it. Only the Brahmins could appreciate it, and they would pass it on to others. But in many cases, in so many cases, then the Brahmins, because they wanted to keep it to themselves, because like with all institutions, with all religions, they want to make money from reciting the Bhagavatam. It was only when Prabhupada came along and translated the entire Srimad Bhagavatam into English that the knowledge in the Bhagavatam was revealed for the whole world to see. So that was the re-establishment of Mahaprabhu's mission in the world, to give this message in every town and village. That was the prediction of Mahaprabhu. This message will be spread to every town and village without fail. I was one time I had some visitors from America. I was living in Kisumu at the time, and these visitors, they came to Africa for the first time ever, and they wanted to see a little bit more than just Kenya. So they said, oh, can we go to Uganda? I said, okay. So I borrowed a car from Pundarik. I don't know if you know Pundarik. Pundarik helped me to establish the center in Kisumu. And these visitors came from America. I borrowed one of his cars. And we went off to Uganda. So we did a little tour of Uganda. We started a temple in Kampala. And we preached along the way in various places like Jinja, Niganga, Mimbarara, and places like that. So we did the whole tour, the whole gamut. Went across the whole. So eventually we reached the border of the Congo. And these devotees said, well, why don't we go into the Congo? I said, well, I've never been to the Congo. I don't really want to go there. It's a little bit dangerous. And the guy who was in charge at the time, Mobutu Sese Seko, he's completely mad. I mean, anything can happen. Plus, this is not my car, and I don't have permission to go into the Congo. So anyway, they convinced me. So we crossed over into the Congo, went through all the formalities. I remember at the time, it was 250,000 Zaires. The unit of currency was 1 Zaire. We got 250,000 Zaires for $1. I mean, if you think the exchange rate of the Kenyan shilling is bad, you should go to the Congo. Then you know what exchange rate is. The first time I came to Kenya, incidentally, one pound was 12 shillings, and $1 was 8 shillings. 12 shillings, and $1 was 8. And you could only get money on the black market. There was no foreign exchange. You had to get Kitakidogo somewhere here. And the situation with foreign currency was really serious. Last month, when I came, at the airport, which gives the worst rate possible, at the airport they were offering 170 shillings to a pound. From 12 when I came at first. However, nothing compared to Zaire. 250,000 for $1. So we got these big bundles of money. The money was so valueless, it was so worthless, they would weigh it. They didn't bother counting it, they would weigh it, like weighing paper. So a kilo of paper was about $10. And that was it. It was completely insane. So when we got into the Congo, we drove, we paid $50 road tax, no idea why. And when they opened the gate to finally let us into the Congo, or Zaire as it was called then, they opened the gate and there was no road. It was just a dirt track. I mean, it was like no road. I mean, not a broken road with potholes, there was no road. So I said to the Askari, Iko wapi barabara? I just paid you $50. I want my money back. And then we drove along. You get to a checkpoint some miles ahead. You see the soldiers with bunduki. They're all drunk, of course, and stoned and everything like that. So I said to him, you see that 250,000 there? It's wrapped in a rubber band. Break it in two. So I broke it in two. Give me half. So he gave me half. I had half, and he had half. So just throw it out the window. So we just threw the money out the window and just kept driving. Didn't bother stopping. So they were running for their scattered notes here and there. So I was throwing 50 cents out that window and 50 cents out that window. But it looked like a lot of money, but it was worthless. So such is the state of affairs in some of these countries. So then when we got into the Congo, there was overnight, the first night we were there was a coup. The soldiers had rioted overnight and the border with Uganda was closed. Immediately the border was closed. So we couldn't get back into Uganda to go back to Kenya. So now what to do? So we scrambled our way towards the border with Rwanda. Managed to get across into Rwanda by bribing the border guards. So we stayed in Rwanda, in Kigali for a few days, cultivated some people there. Then to get back into Kenya, we had to drive through Tanzania and then back into Kenya. So I drove all the way around the lake, the whole of Lake Victoria, without a plan. And just before we arrived in Kisumu, there's a road called Ahero, just before Kisumu, where you have to turn left to go to Kisumu, coming from the Tanzanian border. We're waiting for the traffic to turn. And there's a bull, very carefully grazing in a field there. And he didn't like our car. So he just came charging out of the field, smashed the door of the car, smashed the back door, and went back happily eating his grass. The car was practically destroyed. We got all the way around Lake Victoria and the car was destroyed just a few miles before Kisumu. So when I got back to Kisumu, I just jumped in the shower, I was taking a shower, and Pundarik, he came, he said, oh, you're back. What happened? Did you leave the car in Uganda? I said, no, the car's outside. He said, no, that's not my car. I said, well, it is. So these are the adventures of devotees. Tried to spread the holy name around. But while we were in the Congo, before that coup, we stopped somewhere on the road. There was a nice little river, and we had to drive through the river to get across to the other side. There was no bridge. So while we were waiting, somebody in Uganda had given us some life member. They'd given us some nice samosas and some chavra to take as a little snack on the way. So we were respecting prasada. And out of the blue came these kind of tribal people. They were pygmies, but they had spears and swords dressed in paint and all covered in all kinds of, what looked like warrior regalia. Looked like they were ready for a tribal clash or something. So they surrounded the car as I was halfway eating a samosa, and I was like, wow, who are these guys? And they looked pretty dangerous. So they threw their spears in a circle around the car. And it was like, Jai, Rukmini, Gautami, Sitaram, Lakshmana. And I was saying to myself, well, this is it. This is where I'm going to die. This is the last time. I better enjoy this samosa. What will my mother think of me now? Dead in the jungle, somewhere, nowhere to go, lost, nobody will even know. And they just threw their spears in the ground in a circle around the car and said, Hare Krishna. I was shocked, absolutely shocked. So the little bit of Swahili, of course the Americans didn't speak any, the little bit of Swahili that I knew, I tried to converse with them. I speak French fairly well. They didn't speak hardly any French. So apparently they had been at a conference in Nairobi some years before, and they'd seen Brahmananda Swami chanting and dancing on the streets of Nairobi. And they'd gone back to Zaire, and when they saw our tilak and our dhoti and everything, they remembered the name Hare Krishna. Can you imagine? From years before. And they started they were so overjoyed to see us. I was in fear of seeing them. They were overjoyed to see us. It's amazing how perceptions can change just on the turning of a penny. Perceptions change so much. So this is life. And whether we realize it or whether we don't realize it, we're all under Krishna's protection at every moment in time. Just like Draupadi. What did Draupadi do when Dusasan was trying to pull off her sari? She fought him. She herself is a kshatriya. She's a warrior. She's the daughter of a king. So she knew how to fight. She was also trained in the art. So she could fight Dusasan, but only up to a certain extent. Dusasan was also a warrior, a king himself. So she can't handle a big, strong man like Dusasan. But she fought and fought and fought. Finally, what did she do? She just, hey Govinda. She just threw her hands in the air. What do we do when we're in a war? And the enemy is just overpowering us. And we can no longer, there's no hope for winning this battle. We just throw our hands in the air. And we surrender. So that's what Lord Chaitanya is doing on the altar. Gaur Nitai, Lord Nityananda. They're throwing their hands in the air and saying, hey Govinda, please, without your help, I can do nothing. So similarly with Draupadi, as soon as she did that, all the reams and reams and reams of sari are supplied to her by Krishna himself. So if we think that we're the doer, we're complete. Yes, of course we're the doer, we do something to a certain extent. But man proposes, God disposes. That's the only way, that's the only realization that we need to develop, and we need to develop that in our heart, sincerely. And when we have that understanding, when we have that grasp of that basic knowledge, that vijnana, not just knowledge from the book, but it has to sink into our heart. We can quote so many shlokas and recite so many mantras and this and this and this, and all that is wonderful. And that is not to be decried or be considered to be insignificant. It's not. We should all know some shlokas. But the main thing is what is going on in our hearts. That's what really, really counts. And when we realize something in our heart, we will never forget it. Just like when the child is crying for his mother, the only thing the child is interested in is the mother. As soon as the child is in the bosom of the mother, is in the arms of the mother, immediately everything is over. All the anxiety is gone. So in a similar position, we are in exactly the same position. Krishna is our Father. He's the seed-giving Father of all living entities. And as soon as we're in the position to realize that, we put it into practice and depend on Him, absolutely, without any consideration for anything else. Just surrender. So we have all these shlokas here around the wall, some wonderful shlokas. This one here in front, because Krishna's form, qualities, pastimes, etc. Pastimes is misspelled. Did you know that? So, there was, I was put in charge of the Gita Nagari press. That is the press that produced the Leela Amrita, and is the press that prints and produces all of Satsuru Maharaj's books. He's written many hundreds of books. And one day, the devotee who used to be in charge of the press, one or two books, they went to the printer, and there were some small mistakes in them. And when it goes to the printer, at that stage, it's very expensive to change the book. It can be done, but it costs a lot of money. So, and that devotee was going to leave anyway to go somewhere else. So Satsuru Maharaj said, we should put Vidhur in charge of the press. Because he's such a big fault finder, he never let a book go to the press, go to the printer without a mistake in it. So I was praised by being given this promotion, and at the same time, my ego was reduced by that because don't be such a fault finder. So you can engage your fault-finding propensity now in the service of Krishna. I remember when I joined the movement, I was already a businessman. I had my own little company. I was a mechanical engineer, so on and so forth. I had people working for me. So I was a little bit proud. The other devotees were all young teenagers. I was in my mid-20s, so I had my own house, knew a little bit more than them. So I was a bit puffed up. So the devotee in charge of the temple at the time in Ireland, he put me cleaning the toilets to make sure that my ego would be deflated a little bit. And after a few weeks doing that, I did it. And I was so happy to be relieved from the whole material consciousness, I was prepared to do anything. So that after a few weeks doing that, some new boy, he joined. So then he was given the job of cleaning the toilet, and I was promoted to the kitchen. I now became a pot washer. So here I have this promotion. See, I'm a pot washer. You're a toilet cleaner. So this is just, you know, it's all on the mundane plane. But Krishna doesn't see any difference. Krishna sees whatever little service we render, that is valuable. Somebody is even working in the temple. Somebody being paid a salary to clean the floor. That person is making advancement because he's cleaning the floor. There may be a motivation that he's getting a salary. That's irrelevant. Krishna sees the effort. Just like with Putana. Putana's motivation was to kill Krishna. That was her mentality, kill. Kill Krishna by all means. So she smeared her breast with poison to kill Krishna. And what did Krishna do? He killed her. But he first of all saw her as mother. So she got the benefit of being his mother. She was a potential murderer, not a mother, but still she got the benefit. Because Krishna can only see the good. Only. And Krishna sees the good in everything we do. So we should, in our lives, we should endeavor to fulfill that understanding that we are part and parcel of Krishna. That is the only reason we have this human form of life. For no other reason. And when we engage ourselves in such a way, then look at what we get. Look at the reward. No more birth, death, disease, old age, all this is gone. It is actually Vaikuntha. And we have Vaikuntha here in this premises, in this building. We just have to take it back. This is a little embassy of Vaikuntha here in Mombasa. Of all places. And we have it here, completely at our disposal. to be used anytime we want. Just come, take the darshan of the most beautiful deities in the world and just relish the whole experience. That's all we have to do. So here Vyasadeva, he's not satisfied. He's not satisfied because he hasn't fulfilled that Vigyan. He has the Gyan. The Gyan is there. The Vedas have already been composed. But he needs that Vigyan, as we all need that Vigyan. We need the realized knowledge. And that can come from Srimad Bhagavatam and Srila Prabhupada's purpose. John, I'll stop speaking now. Anybody, any questions? Any comments? Anything to add, subtract, take away, multiply? Do you know, when I was doing algebra in school, I used to hate it. I absolutely hated algebra. I just couldn't figure out how it worked. And I'm now 72 years old. There hasn't been a single day in my life when I've used algebra in practice. Ever. So what do we waste all that time doing? X equals y squared plus z to x. Oh. Waste of time. Because this is the real deal. Srimad Bhagavatam. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavatam Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. This is the real deal. This is what counts. This is what will sustain us in our life and keep us going forever, eternally. So never fail. At least one shloka a day. One shloka a day. We should all make. That's why Prabhupada made this system in such a way. We write, we read one shloka a day. We scrutinizingly study it, as Srila Prabhupada says in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita. Scrutinizingly study my books. You will never fail. Never. Jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai.
Hey, Baba. Huh? Where's the water? So? ખબર સમજાતું નથી ખબર હું જ્યાં બીજી છું 5 મિનિટમાં ફોન કરું છું